Do you ever find yourself searching for something bigger than you? For a community to be a part of? A place founded on truth and love. A place to worship the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and the Son of God. Welcome to Founded in Truth, where we're more than just a fellowship. We're a family, so welcome home.
Yeshua speaking, and he says this. He says something interesting. He says, now after John was arrested, Yeshua came into Galilee proclaiming the gospel of God. You guys know what that is? The gospel. So in first century culture, the gospel was a word that meant basically this good news that was being proclaimed, and it was also a political word in which maybe if there was a new leadership of Rome or a new Caesar had been inaugurated or whatnot, a new leader, if you will, an emperor at that time, the gospel would have gone out into the pagan world of this new king. And here comes Yeshua, and he's talking about the gospel of not Caesar, not this emperor, not this great king. No, the gospel of God is happening now, saying the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel. And the gospel writers, if we go on, they don't hesitate to give Yeshua the title of Christ, right? You ever thought about that? Who grew up thinking that Christ was like a last name to Jesus? Jesus, Mr. Christ, right? And it's the Greek word Christos, and it's not a pagan word. That's stupid. It literally means the anointed one. It's used many, many, many times in the Septuagint for the Hebrew word Mashiach. And the word has the sense of being anointed or being sealed into a position. And can you guys think of any roles in the Old Testament where people were sealed? They were inaugurated into a position through an anointing, right? David was, yeah. For what? For what role? King, right? The priests were as well, but mainly kingship, right? And so what does that mean? It means king. Christ means king. Christos means king. Mashiach means king. Messiah means king. And so there's one author, Scott McKnight, I believe it was, he asserts that when we read Jesus Christ in the New Testament, we should just think to ourselves, King Jesus. And it's so simple when we think about it, but think about that. You are King Jesus. And every time Paul writes King Jesus, right? Or Yeshua Messiah, it should be King Yeshua. King Yeshua. It's there. It's right there. And so it's not his last name. It's just kind of a neat nugget that I love. And so Yeshua lives his life with the focus of declaring this new reality that God has reestablished his kingdom on earth and is inviting his people, the people that are after his heart, into it. And the kingdom is reflected very much so at the ending chapters of Isaiah. Anyone ever read the book of Isaiah? It's a long book, right? Long book, right? The last 10, 15 chapters really focus in on this reality that is going to happen, this fulfillment that's going to happen. And he refers to it as like the new creation, the new heavens and new earth. So this type of new creation that's coming when God restores all things. And this restoration, some type of big restoration that's going to come to our world. And it's a time when the exile, and not just the exile of Judah or not just the exile of Israel, but the exile of mankind from God will end. And it will end by means of the sins of the people being forgiven. So exile was a punishment for sin. Sin taken away, the punishment, you're free now, right? And this is kind of what Isaiah evokes as this time of restoration that's coming. And he speaks about that as if the space of heaven, the space of God's reign, that is, we always talk about being up in heaven, so we look up in the sky, metaphorically, if you will, like it's an actual literal place behind the sun or something. And it's the space where God's domain is, and this space is going to be restored back where it was supposed to be on earth. where it was in the garden. You ever realize that Adam and Eve were in heaven? They walked in the cool of the day. God was there in an intimate manner with them, to where he was not far off. The space of heaven, the dimension of heaven, and the dimension of earth were one. They were overlapped in this space. And I love that. I saw one pastor, he was doing a great job presenting this. He talks about, we always think of heaven and hell, right? Well, in the beginning, it was heaven and earth, right? And this is kind of what the picture that Isaiah is prophetically telling is going to happen when this restoration comes true. And in this, Yeshua submitted himself in a one-on-one fight with the thing that separated heaven from earth, and that would basically be evil, the culmination of evil. And he went face to face with this evil. And at first glance, we look at the story of the gospel and the passion, and it looks like Yeshua has lost the battle to the kingdoms that evil has built up. But we know he didn't. He joined us in our death, and he was resurrected. And the resurrection was a declaration of the victory over death and over sin. And he invites us to experience the same victory in him, to be raised up, as Ephesians 2:6 says, alongside him and be seated in heavenly places now. To be raised to a renewed reality, a renewed earth, a new creation, where Yeshua has been given all power and authority over heaven and earth. And we live out this kingdom through him. And this is the gospel. This is what we live. This is what we partake in, is this newness of life, this reality through the Christ, through the Mashiach, through the King, that we have been restored. We have been freed from the bondage and slavery of sin and death, and we have been raised to life in him. There's a new song out, for those of you who listen to that radio, and it's by a man by the name of Ryan Stevenson, and it's called The Gospel. Has anyone heard this song on the radio? A couple people? I love this. I don't always like flip out when certain songs come on the radio. This song, I'm jamming down the road to this. I mean, people jam to rock music and hip-hop music, and I got my window down. It's the gospel! Like, it's great. And it's not like a really rock-out song. But the chorus, I have the chorus here, and I want to read you the chorus. And it says this: to the captive, it looks like freedom. To the orphan, it feels like home. To the skeptic, it might sound crazy to believe in a God who loves. In a world where our hearts are breaking and we're lost in the mess that we've made, like a blinding light in the dead of night, it's the gospel. The gospel that makes a way. It's the gospel that makes a way. It's the cure for our condition. It's the good news for us all. It's greater than religion. It's the power of the cross. And I love that. I was just kind of prepping. This is the intro to the message I'm fixing to do. And I had to throw that in there because now when you hear that song, maybe you can kind of have that vision of what is so powerful about the gospel. The power of the gospel is the fact that you don't have to live in a state of being dead anymore. You can be raised. There is a way to have life. And not only that, Paul says that you're a new creation. The former things are for... He's quoting Isaiah when Isaiah is talking about the future renewed heaven and earth. The new heavens, the new earth, the new creation has started, and we're a part of it, right? And it's profound when we understand that. And so, do you believe in the gospel of the life, the ministry, the death, and the resurrection, the victorious resurrection of Messiah? You can answer. Yes, of course we do. I hope you do. And if you don't, welcome to Founded in Truth Fellowship. And I hope that we can do a very, very good job at representing what the love and the mercy and the grace of God looks like, in hopes that you will yearn to experience the same freedom that we have. And so, now, I want to talk about faith. Faith. Because after we come to the knowledge of who Yeshua is and what he has done, we're supposed to walk it out. And it's just like walk by faith, walk out our faith. And the word faith is actually a very complicated word, a complex word in the Bible, because it could mean several different things, depending on who's using it and where they're using it. And the Gospels the Synoptic Gospels kind of kind of viewed a certain way, and then John uses it a certain way, and then Paul uses it a certain way, and Hebrews uses it a certain way. It's very interesting. And so when we think of the word faith, sometimes we think of the word belief, right? Like believe, right? Sometimes. We can think of maybe a trust, or we can think of being faithful, right? If you have faith or if you are faithful. It's the same word, pistis in Greek. And it's an action word that we all know. It is indeed a verb. And so when we think of faith and defining faith, we typically go to what book of the Bible of the New Testament? Hebrews, exactly. And we go to the very first verse in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, and it just so happens to be the longest chapter in the book of Hebrews. And quick question, just because I love nuggets and it's cool. Do you guys know where Hebrews was written? It was written, right? Well, who was it written to? How do we know that? Or why do we think that? Because the name that we gave it? So it's fascinating. We know where it was written from, or at least we're pretty sure because of this verse, which I think is ESV, but different translations phrase it differently. But it says, greet all, at the ending chapter, greet all your leaders and all of the saints. Those who come from Italy send you greetings. And so the assertion at the very end of the book of Hebrews is that the book of Hebrews was written from where? Italy. Interesting, right? And essentially, because the letter, if you read it, it contains so many references to the sacrificial system, and it talks about blood a lot, and it talks about cows, and it talks about goats, and it talks about the cult of the temple and priests and priesthood. And essentially, this thing has to be written to those Jews. It's got to be. I mean, look at all this blood and sacrificial stuff. So what do we name this book? Well, it's got to be written to the Jews, so let's just name it Hebrews. True story. It's just interesting. That's kind of a conflated my version of how it became Hebrews, but essentially that's the things that added up to that, because it seems like, it's got to be written to the Hebrews. That's the name. And so Hebrews is actually a passionate letter written by a pastor with great focus and emphasis on Yeshua. This is what the book is about. The gospel, and we read through the gospels, and we get to Hebrews, and we have this passionate writer, this passionate shepherd writing about the life, the death, the resurrection, and the pastor, he or she, we don't really know who wrote it, attempts to assert so many different edifying metaphors about Yeshua and trying to express with as much scope and weight as possible what has been done with us through the gospel and how we're supposed to walk that out in our faith. And not just on a surface level, but a deeper understanding of just how great God's love is, displayed in the cross and released upon the earth and the world that we live in. And so a lot of scholars think that Paul wrote Hebrews, and some scholars, of course, think Timothy, even though at the end it says that Timothy wasn't there, but disregardless. King James wrote in, took liberties and wrote in that Timothy wrote it. Barnabas, maybe. Luke, maybe. In the early 1900s, I find this opinion, everybody say opinion. Fascinating. You can say that. Fascinating opinion. Which means that this is just an opinion. I have no evidence to back it up, and neither do the people who started the opinion. It's just an idea. They think that there are some evidence to point to this. So in the early 1900s, there was an assertion that gained actually a lot of popularity over the years that none other than Priscilla was the writer of the book of Hebrews. No, a woman couldn't write any. No, that's not possible. I like the opinion. What do you want? But we don't know who wrote it, okay? It's just an opinion. Neat opinion, I think. And anyway, and so as I wanted to present Hebrews, we can't read all chapters. We're going to read through chapter 11 here real quick. But I needed to figure out a metaphor to try to prepare everybody for chapter 11, just so we could look at one verse in chapter 11 to try to figure out this whole faith thing. And this is my metaphor, and it may not be great, but bear with me. Everybody good? We're ready? The book of Hebrews is like a pole vaulter. A pole vaulter. Pole vaulter. You know the guys that run, and they got big muscles, and they run real fast, but they have this big stick that they stick in the ground, and it makes them go up in the air and over this other pole, right? Pole vaulter, right? And so And so chapters 1 through 10 is like the pole vaulter. And if you've ever watched the Olympics, it's quite amazing. I mean, you got someone that's fixing to go, and they got this huge, big old, heavy-looking pole, and they start running, and they're running fast with agility, and they're focused on one thing and one thing only. They're going to put this pole right there, and they have all their muscles moving, and they're gaining speed. And this is, I believe, how the author spends the first 10 chapters describing the awesomeness of Yeshua and who the person of Yeshua is. And how he came in the manifestation of God's glory and God's presence in human form. When you look at Yeshua, you see God's glory. You see God's presence walking the earth. And how he lived on a mission to reestablish God's kingship on the earth, crippling the powers and the kingdoms of the world through his sinless death and cross, forgiving, healing, and showing forth the limitless measures of God's love. And he's displayed as a type of high priest in this book of Hebrews, interceding for us. And it's a beautiful, beautiful testimony of who Yeshua is. And he took into himself our sin and our exile and conquered it with the love of God. And I know this is kind of reminding you guys of church, me talking about the love of God so much. Anybody at church? Good, because this is what our Bible is about. And I will never relent on expressing that emphasis. And the author is writing to a fellowship about all these things, but he also warns them. He says, listen, do not abandon this belief in who God has displayed himself as on the earth and who is representing God's kingdom on the earth as our king. Do not abandon the belief of what took place, not only on the cross, but when that stone got rolled away. Do not abandon that, because this is your life. Do not abandon your lifeline. And this is what the author of the book of Hebrews is pretty much asserting. He encourages them to walk in faith and to pledge their allegiance to their king. It's amazing. We always think about believing in the actions of Yeshua and having faith, but have we ever inserted that word allegiance? Do we have allegiance to the king? It kind of changes like, wow. And that's Hebrews 1 through 10, summed up, essentially. And today we're going to look at Hebrews chapter 11, which is after 10. And chapter 11 is kind of like the actual pole that the vaulter is running with. And in that, when he finally gets to the point where he needs to plant the pole, you'll notice this pole hinges everything that the runner has been doing for the last few seconds and running and focus. And all of that has built up to this point, and it's all focused on that pole, which bends and then flings him up and hinges him up over to the finish line. And that's my metaphor for Hebrews chapter 11. Is it a good metaphor so far? Are you following? Okay, that's good. To complete the junk. And as we're going up, we're flinging up, we're looking back at the last 10 chapters, and we're figuring out what that has to do with us going forward in the book. And once we get to that pole, that whole pole is focused on what? How we're supposed to proceed to this point. With everything we've learned about Yeshua, with what we're going forward with. How do we think as believers in Yeshua, knowing all this knowledge? How do we walk? What do we do? How do we respond to certain situations? When we walk outside of this corrupt world, what are we supposed to look like in a world of darkness? What are we supposed to look like in a world of brokenness? And that's what chapter 11 is trying to encourage. And so we're going to read just a few verses to kind of pray. This is the point when, oh Lord, I didn't put that in there. Come on. There it is. Here we go. Technical difficulties. And so this is chapter 10. At the end of chapter 10, this is the point where the pole hits the dirt. This is what we're flinging into the chapter 11. And he's stating this. He says, he's talking about going through trials and tribulations because of your faith. And he or she, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by what? Faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. And this is a quote. He's actually quoting the Tanakh. Some assert he's quoting the Septuagint version of Isaiah, and then this is actually Habakkuk that he's quoting right here. So this is Old Testament prophecy that he's trying to assert at this point, and we live by faith. And so that's going to, as we walk with the testimony of Yeshua, what does it mean to live by faith as we go into chapter 11? And how many of you guys know that you guys want to be like an early believing fellowship, like first century? You guys want to do that? Are you sure? Are you sure? Because whenever they received these letters, they would read the letters. All of it. Everyone just stopped. And that's what they did in early church, if you will. I mean, they would come around and study and pray, but there was a lot of reading and listening to someone proclaim something edifying. And so we're going to read Hebrews chapter 11. Not the whole book, just one chapter. Can you guys deal with one chapter? And I want you guys to get a feel for what the author is trying to tell you as a believer in Yeshua. So I'm going to invite a woman that I look up to. She's a mentor to me in many areas. The beautiful, the wonderful Angie Clark. If you would please join me on stage. I'm sure I could read that whole chapter, but she sounds prettier than me. You can just have that and
Somebody called me at 8 o'clock this morning.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
And said, would you mind reading the book of the chapter 11 in Hebrews? I said, sure, without even looking to see that there's 40 verses. So are y'all ready? Okay. Awesome. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the words were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it he being dead still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promises of foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child which was past the age, because she judged him faithfully who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on this earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called," concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of of Joseph's and worshiped, the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instruction concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Esteem the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover in the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. And it was by faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she received the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, become valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth, and all these, having attained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. God, having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Amen.
That's a big deal. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. This is great. So, what'd you think? So you can kind of get a feel for the pastor writing and the passion they're writing, and just the example after example after example. Nope, here's another example I'm going to write in there. Does he ever get tired? And another example and another example. This is about what you're supposed to be encouraged by these individuals. And it's fascinating because, of course, we know there's a letter that was written and it was read by the early believers, and later it was read at weekly gatherings, the whole book. and this specific chapter speaks about a specific topic, and you already know what it is, but I'm going to have you say it just so it stays at the forefront of your mind. What's the topic it's speaking about? Faith, exactly. Now, when we think of faith, what do we typically think of in our world? Just the contemporary, what is the generic synonym for faith? Hope. Hope is a good one. Belief. A lot of belief. We typically think sometimes of having a hope or believing something's going to happen. Do you believe that? Do you have faith in that? Yeah, I believe that. And when this chapter speaks of faith, is it speaking about, with all of its examples, is it speaking about this internal thing, this mental condition that is going on, this idea that's developing in someone's head? But does it speak about people who are thinking about something or believing something on the inside? It speaks about their actions, which is fascinating. It speaks about them doing things. And when we look at the faith of believers in the Bible, we do see this mental spark that happens, and this logic that goes on, and this reasoning that goes on inside of one's head, but it doesn't stop there. It's not just a good idea. Faith will start in your mind. It'll start with a reasoning. It'll start with this conclusion, but it will always turn into an action. That is what faith looks like. And so we get to verse 1, and it's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, and it's one of the only places in the Bible where faith is actually defined, which is kind of weird, Like, this word is used so much in the Old and New Testament, and like, what does it mean? Well, Hebrews chapter 11 tells us, or attempts to, and it says this. Now, faith is the, what's that word? Confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. You guys have something similar in your Bibles? Most of you, maybe? Something that provokes kind of the same idea. And so I want to look at the Greek, and I know everybody always wants to learn Hebrew, and no one really cares about Greek. I want to learn Greek, because Greek's pretty cool, because I want to learn about what the Gospels are actually saying. In the earliest manuscriptures we have of all the New Testament books are Greek, and so Greek's kind of a cool language for me. I kind of geek out on it. Even though I do not read Greek, I just have a nice software that looks up all the meanings and a concordance and all that mess. But I'm trying. I would love to one day. And so let's look at these two Greek words here, that confidence and assurance. And so here we go. You guys think I can do it? So now faith is the hypostasis in what we hope for and the elenkos about what we do not see. That helps a lot. And so, like many of us use a contemporary translation such as ESV or NIV. It's just easier to read. And more contemporary translations have this verse translated like this. This is kind of what I pulled from NIV, NAS, NET, and NAS. And faith is the confidence, or maybe yours says assurance, or if you have like a more blunt translation, to be sure. Anybody have be sure? No one? I found that online. I thought that was kind of like, well, you got to be sure. So faith is being sure in what you hope for and the conviction of things not seen. How many of you guys have a Holman Bible? No one? All the teens have a Holman Bible, just so you know. I love how they actually put that word as proof. It's proof of what is not seen. I love that. And so I want to kind of jump over to some more conservative translations. And when I say conservative, I mean a little bit older in how they translate things. And we're going to go straight to KJV, CEV, or the Holman Bible. And they translate the verse like this. Now faith is the substance and reality of things hoped for, and the evidence and proof of things not seen. Do I have a slide with both of them? I think I do. Are these different? Yeah, Holman just says, he says this, where is it? Now faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. See, one of these translations has to do with a confidence, a hope, belief inside. I'm sure this is going to happen. The other one has to do with a reality of what is happening and an actual substance of what is happening. And I feel like they're a little bit different. And I kind of lean towards I don't always lean towards the KJV or how they translate, but in this case, I tend to lean towards them. And it's not a bad thing. If your Bible says assurance or confidence or being sure, it's not a bad thing. It's the same Greek words. It's just, there's no exact English word for that word, and so it's translated many different ways. So according to these translations, faith is not simply a mental idea. It's a reality. It's not something that you just psych yourself up and it's like, okay, I think I can. It's not that. It's something else. It's an actual experience that you walk in. It's a reality that you walk in. And we see that these two, of course, are very different. And so, how many of you guys have ever been taught that if you think about something really, really hard, and the gospel, the way it's translated, without doubting, that's faith? We're going to discuss that here in just a few minutes, but guys, I don't think that's what faith is, I'll just tell you. I don't think faith, the Christian faith, the believer faith, is thinking about something and believing something for no reason whatsoever. I want it to happen, therefore I have faith that it will happen. I don't think that's a scriptural thing. Just because you want something to happen, you psych yourself up. No, it's going to happen. Maybe if I think really, really, really hard, my gas tank's been empty for 20 miles and it's on the red line, but if I think really, 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 really hard, it will fill back up. Now, there is a scenario where that could be faith, but that in and of itself, I wouldn't think would be a display of faith. That's being a little dumb. And so I think what's being said here is not that I need to think really, really, really hard and concentrate really, really, really hard and convince myself that this is true and what will happen is going to happen without any evidence or any trust or any backing, just blind belief. I think what's being said here is something that's much more profound by the author of the book of Hebrews. And we as believers in this Messianic King, Yeshua, and our faith in the God of Israel, faith is not just a mental exercise. It begins there. It begins in your mind. It begins with a mental exercise. It begins with thinking things through and consideration and reasoning and logic. It does. But it also has to do with the choices that you make based off of those reasonings and the action that comes from it. And I know I'm kind of throwing this big net out there, and it looks really vague, and where is he going with this? And we're going to pull it back together, but I got to do that to pull it in, right? And so what on earth does that mean? So in South Carolina, again, I'm trying to think of examples of faith, and this is the best I could come up with, because sometimes I'm not very creative. So in South Carolina, we have something that amazing happens every single year, and we have a season called the summer. How many of you love the summer? A lot more older people than I thought. So when I was a child, I loved the summer growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, because no school. Hey, yay, right? Yeah, I love summer, right? Now, for those of us who are adulting, we probably don't like summer as much anymore because it gets a little hot, and it gets a little humid, and it gets a little sticky, and then it gets hot, and then it gets humid, and then it gets sticky. And for those of us who don't like it to be hot and humid and sticky, we look forward to another season. Fall. Who likes fall? Right? Fall is nice because it's not ice everywhere, but it's chilly, and you get to walk outside. Ooh, yes, it's fall, it's here. And oh, look, all those summer leaves are dying. And just pretty. The death of all the creation is just beautiful to us. And it's a true story. And we love it because it's like a relief. It's what we look forward to because it's more comfortable, right? And so something fascinating happens in South Carolina, and North Carolina, I'm sure too, in late August, early September. And this amazing thing that happens in the South is called Uggs and pumpkin spice. Uggs and pumpkin spice. You guys know what I'm talking about? Uggs. Ugly boots, yeah. And you look outside and you begin to see people wearing Uggs. And you begin to see people at Starbucks and all these other coffee places drinking this warm, hot pumpkin spice lattes. And why is this so amazing, or crazy, should I say? Because it's still 80-something degrees outside. And it's just fascinating. But these people who are getting these fall clothes on and getting these fall drinks that are so uncomfortable to even sip on when it's 85 degrees outside, and it's still hot, and it's still humid, and it's still sticky, they celebrate the coming anticipation of fall by their actions. And they put on these stupid-looking boots, and they order a hot coffee when it's 85 degrees outside because they are living in the reality of something that is not seen yet. And it's not something that they're just believing is coming. It's something they know is coming and that they want to experience. They want to display the substance of what is coming right now, even in a world that looks at them like they are crazy. Upside down. What are you doing? You silly. Aha. It's any moment now. It's coming. Cheers. Yeah. Pumpkin spice everything. They're acting on their faith of fall. if you will, if I can say that. I know that's a horrible metaphor. Horrible, but they know that they have a good reason to do something different because of what they know is coming. They know that summer is not going to last forever. And so when it starts to get chill, and in South Carolina, what happens is it drops in temperature. Just all of a sudden, and there will be one night where it's cold. And the windows will go open, and it'll be like 50 degrees outside. And your wife opens the windows of the bedroom and turns off the heat because fall's coming. And so the next day, you break out the fall clothes. And the very next day after that, guess what temperature? But you got a taste of it. And that taste has prompted you to understand that the world around you is not going to stay this way forever. And your hope and your anticipation is going to cause you to think and reason this scenario. Every single year this happens. I know it happens. I know the seasons change. I know it's hot right now, but it's going to be cooler. The leaves will die. It'll be great. And I can pull out my sweater, and I can pull out my scarf, and I can pull my Uggs now and go to Starbucks and order my I have faith that fall is coming, and it's time that I demonstrate that faith and I walk out my faith as a reality of what is coming, even though I do not see it. When we were at camp at Sukkot, how many of you guys went to Sukkot? You might be wearing your shirt today if you wear the Sukkot. Yeah, this is our Sukkot shirts. And I almost forgot to wear mine this morning. And those of you who were camping over on the electrical side, you know that we had some wild animals that were far from the woods. Sometimes you'd hear some coyotes, and then you had those ultra vicious cows that we were warned about. It's an inside joke. We were warned. There was someone who was very concerned about safety and a cow walking into the camp, and they were like, "Yeah, man, wait, just call me. I'll shoot it." Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're dangerous. And it was a legitimate concern, but regardless. And every morning I would wake up from my tent, and it would be dark outside, pitch black, no sun, no dawn, nothing. And I get my little golf cart, and I try not to wake up anybody, but I knew I was waking up everybody, going to the coffee tent where Mike was, had everything set up. And on my way almost every morning, an hour before the sun even comes up, I would hear this bird, this rooster next to us, just crowing, making all this stupid racket. And I thought to myself, it's pitch black. You dumb animal. Stupid animal. Is it blind? I mean, and I started going home and I did a little bit of research, and some roosters are just stupid. But most roosters and crows were the two examples. Most of them, it talks about them feeling the light, or they also have an internal time clock, and that's what you agreed with, the internal time clock inside them that causes them to get up when it is pitch black and crow and announce the coming of the light, even though it's nowhere to be found. The rooster is a sign that something is changing. The world is not going to stay the same right now, and it is walking in faith, if you will, stupid bird, in faith, making the announcement and living in the reality that the sun is fixing to rise. What does our faith look like? What does our faith look like? It is not blind belief. The rooster didn't wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and think, if I believe really, really hard, that sun's going to rise. It's going to do it. Stupid bird. And our faith is not something that you believe for simply no reason. That's stupid. I mean, no reason at all, really? Well, our God is not stupid. Our Bible is not stupid. Our king is not stupid, and the patriarchs were not stupid, and we as believers in the one true king of Israel are not stupid. And we have these phrases like blind belief. Anyone ever heard that? Blind belief? Or blind faith? Or what's the leap of belief? Leap of faith. Leap of faith. Take a leap of faith. I don't think that's Christian faith. I don't think that's a believer's faith. It's kind of, yeah. And if we continue reading Hebrews chapter 11, we see three different examples, at least. Three different examples where faith started with reason. And that reason fueled the action of the participants to walk it out. So you want to read some of those? So verse 11 is the first example, and it's Sarah. And it's interesting because there's a few liberties taken with how Sarah is represented here, but that's fine. So with what's spoken about Sarah in Genesis and what's spoken by the commentary in Hebrews, we get this idea right here. So in verse 11, chapter 11 of Hebrews, by faith Sarah herself received the power to conceive, even when she was past age, since she, what's that next word? You got it? Considered him faithful who had promised. Considered. Why did she conceive? What was her faith? Where did her faith start? She considered something. And Sarah's like 80-something years old now. Like, let's not play around with this. When she was told she was going to have children, what did she do? I mean, come on, like, Sonny, I've been around for a while. I know that it's not going to happen. Like, you're funny. And we look at Hebrews, and she considered him faithful. She considers whether or not the one making this promise to her is actually trustworthy to bring it out. Is he trustworthy enough to bring this promise about? They've been traveling through the strange land for quite a while now, and there's one God that made these promises to them, that has been taking care of them, that has got them a lot of wealth, safety, comfort, everything that they've ever needed. And she's told you're going to have a child, and it says that she considers. And that's the question. She considers, has this God already been faithful up to this point in my life? And what is the answer? She had a reason. It wasn't just, oh, great, I love kids. It wasn't that. My God is faithful enough to fulfill this promise. There is logic in that. There is a reason in that. She has that rooster crowing right there by her experiences, by what God has done in her life. Was she absolutely certain? Probably not. But she had a reason. She considered. Abraham, in verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. It's the Akkada, right? And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, so this is important, this is what the author's trying to say, and whom it was said, through Isaac your offspring shall be named. And so what does Abraham do? In verse 19, how does 19 start off? He considered that God was able to even raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. Isaac was the one that was promised. And through Isaac, all these things are going to happen, all these nations and all this blessing, and everything's going to happen through this one son. But Abraham, I need you to take him up to that altar. I need you to take the knife with you, and this is going to be an olah offering, which means not only are you going to kill him with a knife, you're going to burn him. It's a big fiery offering. And Abraham considered, has God been faithful this much? Yes. The reason I have a son in the first place is because of God's faithfulness. Isaac was Abraham's rooster. Can I say that metaphor? That was the rooster. That was the crowing. And he didn't know what was going to happen. But he had faith, and it wasn't blind. It wasn't, oh, hope everything works out, son. Let's go up the mountain and carry this wood. I mean, that was not the attitude, according to the authors in Hebrew. He considered that God was able, if God has done this much, if God has done all of these things for me and my family, and I've witnessed this, God can even raise him from the dead. Come on, son. Let's walk this out. He considered. Faith is not dumb, blind belief. And many of us have friends right now that think that we are crazy because we're sitting around in a bunch of chairs in a church on Saturday morning, and because we don't eat some pig in South Carolina, and they don't understand why we won't just mow the lawn on Saturday afternoon, And they think that we're crazy. Anybody have people that are concerned about them? Aren't they? What we do here? Yeah. Y'all following this? Yeshua? What? The fact is that we have a very good reason to have our faith here today together as a community. We have a very good reason to follow this person of Yeshua. We have a very good reason to believe the things that we do about Yeshua. And one of the most basic reasons is because we had authors and eyewitnesses in the very Bible that you hold. This isn't just one guy. These are a multitude of eyewitnesses that have written something about this historical figure that we know existed. It's a basic reason. You have something in your hand right now that prompts your faith. You have something. And you look around and you can see the manifestation of his resurrection and his power in the lives of those around you. And I see them right here, sitting in this very room. I see testimony after testimony and reason after reason after reason before my very eyes. Yeah, this is why I follow that Yeshua. It's not blind faith. I hope I'm right. Stupid. What? I hope you're right. Hope you're right with what? I mean, you have a reason. Your faith is not in vain. It is founded on good reasons. When Paul in Corinth, some of the believers in Corinth they had heard about the resurrection, but they weren't believing that Yeshua had risen from the dead. And he actually says this. Look at this. This is great. He pulled a. Thank you. So 1 Corinthians 15:3, and he says, "For I delivered to you as one of the first, most important, what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures." We're going to do a series on that soon. I'm really excited about it. He was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter, then the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James and then the other apostles. Last of all, as to one untidily born, he appeared also to me. So Paul's not just sitting here saying like, listen guys, just believe me. Just blind belief. Just take a leap of faith. Come on. I mean, what do you got to lose? You know, I got 500 cats over here that saw him with their own eyes. You want to go talk to them? I got a reason. Quit being dumb. No resurrection. We got 500. All ours, I guess. I mean, everyone just made something up at one time. When I was walking on that road and I got blinded, just made it up. I mean, come on. He's trying to give a reason why they should believe. He didn't just tell them, guys, I mean, that's what the Bible says, so there's a reason. They didn't have the New Testament back then. It was a joke. There's a reason. And as a follower of Yeshua, the life and the ministry, the trial, the death, and the resurrection of Yeshua, guys, that's our rooster crowing. That is what we base our walk of faith on when we leave the house in the morning or when we wake up. That's what we do. We have our rooster. We have the crowing. And that the powers of darkness, the sin, and that death have been defeated once and for all, and that the corrupt human condition that we sometimes battle with, and the unforgiveness that exists within some of us, and the tragedy that some of us have experienced in our lives, and the hurt and the brokenness that some of us have experienced in our lives, and some of the broken, shattered relationships that some of us have experienced in our lives that we've gone through, the rooster crowing, it has crowed on the cross and the stone was rolled away, and those things do not get the last word in our life anymore. No more. Resurrection, love, mercy. Those things get the last word for what we have considered and how we walk. Those are the things that get the last word. And how do I know this? Because you can listen to the rooster crowing, and even if it's cloudy outside one morning, or even if it's snowing, or even if there's a solar eclipse first thing in the morning, we know that there is a new dawn coming and there is a new world coming. And even if the darkness delays past a little while longer, we know it's coming. That's what our hope is in, even though it's unseen. There's a reason to believe and trust, and there is a reason to walk by faith. And so, the only thing that keeps your faith from just becoming a fascinating idea in your brain is whether you do something about it, is whether if you put on your Uggs. Are you going to do something that does not jive with the world around you, that looks crazy even? Because that's what walking out your faith is all about. And so we have one more in verse 8. I'm going to slip back in chapter 11, verse 8. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise and in the foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise, for he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. So he went out, and for the reasoning that took place, the author doesn't include, but he considers this Yahweh is trustworthy to pack up his family and go. He considers this. And a believing messianic faith is about walking out what God has called you to do. And God is never going to call you to do something that you can't base it off something he's already done for you. I truly believe that. Every leap of faith that we've taken in our life, there's something that we considered. Is God really someone I can trust? And so we're followers of Yeshua. And Yeshua calls us to a faithful obedience, right? And the ways to follow Yeshua are not always easy, are they? All right, I mean, I'm looking at people I know who have made choices by their faith. I know it's not easy. I know it's scary at times. And walking out your faith, even not in just like, oh, I hope God does something. No, walking out your faith also includes how you respond to the world around you. So walking out your faith could be that forgiveness or that broken relationship that needs to be reconciled. I don't like that because that gets awkward. He said that about me on Facebook. Not always easy. We want our human condition to take lead in our life. And how many of you have always wanted to respond to violence, at least in your mind, when someone's offended you? Maybe you have in your life. Just raise your hand. If you've ever wanted to respond in violence, or have in your life, a couple people haven't. Wow, God bless you. Someone does something really mean, and you just think in your mind. No one, just me, right? Wish you'd go away forever. Human condition. What about how sexuality is treated in our culture? That's a big one. It's a big one. Is it weird to say that you've committed to wait till you're in covenant with a person before sleeping with them? Is it weird in our world? Pretty weird. And it's a big one. It's a hard one, right? Let's be honest about it. It's a hard one, right? And it's weird. Or even if you're married and you're in a covenant relationship, this world tells you and even facilitates with websites, facilitates the means to go to someone that you're not in covenant with and sleep with them. And that's acceptable. And if you say that, no, that's not what my faith, that's not how I walk out my faith is against that, people are looking at you like it's 80 degrees outside and you're wearing big furry boots and drinking a pumpkin. But seriously, right? And they're looking at you like this dumb bird screaming at the moon that the sun's coming out. What are you talking about? It's very easy to gossip about other people. It's very easy in a fellowship setting just like this to hear something about someone and go around the entire fellowship and spread this shame and this gossip about someone else just because you want to, because it feels good, I guess, right? These are things that the unbelieving world does, that the world without Christ does, that the world without the testimony of Yeshua does. These are what they do. But why does Yeshua ask us to do these things? How many of you guys know that there is a new creation that is coming that is not here yet, and it has already started? And Yeshua speaks about this, and the prophets speak about this, and they speak about a world that has started, in my opinion, because of the resurrection of our King, and because of our own, if you will, resurrection, like Ephesians 2 talks about. This world of new creation has started and is spreading throughout this corrupt world. But in this world, when Yeshua comes back and the climax of this restoration is done, this world will not be a world where you respond with violence. This world will not be a world that pain and unforgiveness is littered in the streets and plastered on billboards. This world will not be a world where you are not concerned about what covenant standing you have with your wife or your future wife. This is a world where all relationships will be one. We will all be unified. We will know each other. We will be at peace, complete peace. Does that sound like a world that you're used to seeing? It's not. But this is the world of our King. This is the kingdom of God. This is the kingdom that Yeshua walked out to try to give us a taste of what was coming. And when we think in those terms of that world coming and being planted here, does it make sense not to respond in violence? Does it make sense to forgive someone? Does it make sense to hold true to whatever this covenant is you have with someone else? With a world like that you know is coming and that I would dare say you are a part of now, does it make sense to pray for your enemies? Does it make sense to pray for blessings on your enemies? Does it make sense to do and act like this world that Yeshua walked out, and what did he say? He said, "Follow me." Does it make sense to walk that world out in a world that is corrupt in anticipation of knowing that God has sent a king to earth that died with us to raise us to life so that this new creation and the restoration of all things can be established on this world, and heaven and earth can become one again, just like in the garden? Does it make sense as an ambassador of that future world that we should live as if something is changing and something new is coming, and what we're living in now is not going to last forever? There is going to be a change, and I'm going to be a part of it, not when it happens, but when it comes right now. I'm walking it out now. That is what faith looks like. That's what faith looks like. And so as we leave today and we go back into that world, and we struggle with that world, and we struggle with battling the things of the corrupted world and the human conditions that we still face every single day, I want you to be encouraged that when you walk in faith, and despite the genre of faith that you're walking in, that when you come to that place where there is a test or there is something hard that you have to do, maybe God's calling you to, sell your house and quit your job and just depend on Him because you know He's faithful. I don't know anyone who's done that before. Knowing, and I sat here and watched the bushes, and I'll admit, that was kind of drastic. He quit his job, okay. And they were the ones who were encouraging me through their faith, saying, no, we know our God. This is not something we had to consider for very long. They had a reason. You have a reason to walk out your faith. And in a world that thinks you're crazy for loving instead of hating, for a world that thinks you're crazy for turning the other cheek when you already have a black eye, for the world that thinks you're crazy for running after the person who you had a falling out with just to make sure that you did what you tried to do to make sure that you forgave them and they forgave you and reconciled them. That sounds crazy, but that is what faith looks like, and that is what the Christian faith looks like. That is what a faith after our King Yeshua looks like. That is what a faith of the kingdom of God looks like when we walk it out. And although we walk it out now, we experience the substance of it now. We experience the reality of it now. We experience it now in how we walk. Why? In a hope and as evidence for the unseen, for what is not yet seen. But we can live in the substance of it now.
Hey everybody, I'm Matthew Vanderels, pastor at Founded in Truth Fellowship, and if you enjoyed this message and would like to see more messages like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking here. If If you'd like more information about what we do and who we are, or if you'd like to partner with us to make a donation, you can do so with this link right here. Hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Shalom.